really close in time. So let me show you some aspects of Adobe Camera Raw, the new features. Just to run down the features, and then we'll get into more of these next time.
Yeah, they changed it.
Yes, to change the format entirely. Before we go here, I'll cancel this.
That's in Italy, outside of one of those mountainous villages.
It's the outside of
Montepulciano.
Montepulciano, that's right,
Right.
Montepulciano.
Has a wonderful wine.
Yes.
All the wines taste better there.
Yes, they do.
Right.
I know firsthand.
A really nice feature in Adobe Camera Raw, that it always has been there, and I see so many times wonderful, beautiful waterfalls, and the water is blue. I mean, just take the blue color out. Well, there's also a very easy way to do that. If you come over to, I hadn't even thought about using the auto now. Let's click auto and see what it does. No, didn't do it.
Oh, do that.
Mm.
In the basic tab, see where it says white balance? As shot, and there's a drop down there, but what more important is this little eyedropper. You click on that little eyedropper, bring it over to where the water is blue, and click on it, and it white balances the whole image based on the selection you made. Let me go back. One part. You don't want to pick the green, so you'd want to pick an area which is sort of a mid-tone of the color that you want to change. Click that, and it rebalances the light throughout the whole image. Then you work on it. So here it is, it's in Basic tab, where it says white balance and that little eyedropper.
Wow.
Is there a certain temperature it moves it to when you click on it?
It's very neutral. You could look at the numbers on them, but it's a very neutral, I don't remember what the numbers would be. Do it again for this image. You see the reds? Remember I have that up here in the upper right, I have that triangle clicked on, so it's showing me that I have some blowout there. I can go to the highlight slider and move it to the left just a little bit, removes the blowouts. Come and get the auto white balance. Click right here where it's about neutral. The click area is too bright to set the white, too bright to set the white balance. Okay, in that case. That's a new feature also. Never did that before. Yeah, just corrected the color throughout the image. See it again?
Wow.
And the funny thing is, you don't, when you're just looking at the first one, the before, it looks okay until
it looks natural, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the difference for the new balance was just custom, wasn't it? Is that all it said?
Say it again, ask the question.
Once you corrected the white balance, did it show a temperature or did it just go to custom?
Let's take a look.
The panel, I think, would tell us if.
Steve, do you go by numbers? or just
Well,
the one
no, the
close?
reason I'm asking, I just wonder what it's moving it to. Is it making that daylight, or is it some other? It looks like a fairly warm temperature by the slider, but let's
There it
see.
is up in the top. Look, see at the very top above the histogram? You see it? Wherever
Right.
I'm holding the little eyedropper, 224, 226, 226.
It's the
Oh,
red, green,
That's
blue, but that's not the Kelvin.
Yeah,
no,
that's not the. I thought it might tell us in the white balance tab. It
oh, I
says
see.
I don't think it will on a,
But
No,
it
no,
won't do that on a JPEG.
no. But what a difference. But
yeah,
here,
it works well.
yeah.
I'm just trying to get my mind around how does it know where to move it to?
Don't worry about that.
No, well, partly on, no.
Oh man, that sounds like
You're,
what you hear just before you hear, here, hold my beer.
Steve, you're as bad as I am wanting to know what's behind the picture.
Well, partly, when I bring this in, partly you want to pick a location that is not real deep blue. You want to pick one that pretty much is a mid-tone level, and that's what you click on. You
Like a
click on
gray
some of
card?
these others, it will rebalance those, but even so, it rebalances all the way across so nicely. It just is such a great little feature.
John, but
What
we're
are
not
those?
we're not looking for like a gray card, are we? The mid-tone? No.
No, no.
Well, that time when you adjusted
There
then,
was
it Kelvin
temperature.
9100.
Yeah, the difference is it won't show it on a JPEG, but it will on a RAW.
On a raw file.
Okay.
Ah, I got it. Got it.
Mm.
What I wanted to show you on this one is, let me take it into Adobe Camera Raw. Another feature in Adobe Camera Raw. The aspect of having that little triangle clicked on the up there, you see the reds, and then we either change the overall exposure, which will remove some of it, but I wouldn't necessarily do that on this image because I don't want to lose the detail in the dark area. But there are multiple ways of doing things in Adobe Camera Raw. These sliders are so good. I could lower the exposure, open up the shadows, which brings back the shadow areas in here, then lower the highlights. Now I know that I have great pixels in all parts of that image.
Wow, that's powerful right there.
Isn't that wonderful? I must tell you, I take the images into Adobe Camera Raw either directly because I'm shooting RAW and do all of my initial changes there, then take it into Photoshop, and then sometimes do what I just did, come back through the filter back to Adobe Camera Raw to work on things. And the
John,
other,
can you do it again? I couldn't write fast enough.
absolutely. If you send me $4,000, I'll send this to you right away. Let me take it back in there for you. Adobe Camera Raw. You see all the blocked up bright areas. And if I come up to, excuse me, exposure first and lower it some, I've reduced it, but I was afraid of taking it too far because I would lose detail in the horse. But I can open the shadow area nicely and then take the highlight slider and move it down to the left. And now I have removed all the problems of any blowout in white. I have good areas in the shadows. Now, if I move the shadow slider to the left so that you see the blue area coming up, that area says you've lost detail in that area. That's what the advantage of this little triangle in the top on the left-hand side of the histogram, so that I can see highlights and shadows. The other is, if you hold the Alt key, and let me take the highlight slider, it becomes, if I hold the Alt key and click on that slider, I get a black screen. If I move it to the right, anything that starts coming in means it's blowout. So as long as I have a black screen, I don't have any blowouts. Hold the Alt key and do that with the shadow slider. Anywhere where it's now, if I move it to the left, you see that blue coming in says you've lost detail in that area. So I move it back to the right until there is a pure white screen. That means I have recovered all the detail in that area.
Wow.
John, what's the difference in choosing to use highlights versus whites and shadows versus blacks?
Whites, yes, good question. The highlights really are, there's a range of pixels that represent a light area. But when you're dealing with white, let me hold this Alt key again. Holding the Alt key and moving this slider, you see how fast that white blows out areas. Where with the highlight slider, I have a nice range of things I can do. It gives me more flexibility of dealing with a range of highlights rather than just dealing with whites. Whites are pure whites and it puts it in and blows the pixels out. Blacks, pure black, blocks up the black areas very quickly. Now, sometimes you want to do that depending on the image, not on this image, because I want detail in all parts of this image. And the reason I use, this is in my volume 2, my books. And the reason I use this is because you have such a difference in shadows to background highlights, a very high contrast situation. And you could see what could be done in that kind of situation.
Thank you.
Say, John, this
Yes.
is Mike. If you go back to the original image with the blowouts, and then try the curves and move the upper right-hand corner of the linear curve, I think you might want to try that.
Yes, indeed. I was just, that's another aspect that I was going to go to, which is often I will go to the curves, and the curves now have all these little options at the top of the curve. If you click on the first one, it gives you the highlights, lights, details, and shadows, which breaks down even more which portion you want to deal with. And you could grab the curves and do it. I tend to just use the sliders. So in this case, if I wanted to adjust the brightest highlights, I can just use that slider. And if it's not giving me everything I want, I can use the next one and so on, in conjunction with what I had up in the basic tab, but also the shadows. And I found that breaking up the dark areas between darks and shadows works really well rather than the single shadow slide here. Often I start with this one and then move down to this one and adjust. Now, we'll get into more of Adobe Camera Raw next time because here is another targeted adjustment tool. And this is so neat. You have the targeted adjustment tool and I can bring my cursor over to wherever I want to put it and hold it down and move. Whoop, that's not it. Sorry about that. There we go. And you see it's adjusting the curve automatically based on wherever you put this. You can adjust the curve automatically based on having that target adjustment tool. But first I do changes up in this area of the basic tab, then come down and do refinements by using this first one. You can use only the curve. You can adjust only reds, greens, or blues. And that's where you get even more sophisticated. But I'll tell you, 99.9% of the time, everything I want to do that I've done in my images, I pretty much can do them with these sliders in conjunction with the basic sliders of highlights and shadows up here.
Say, John, if you click on that white circle
Yes?
on the curves,
Yeah.
okay, on the right, grab the right-hand corner and just drop it down.
Yeah. Right? That's right. Because you can adjust your highlights this way, which is really a nice feature in this. See how it's adjusting the highlights in the image all the way over. And look at the histogram at the top as you're moving this. Remember, blowout is where the histogram is touching the right side. So by moving this down, it's moving that histogram in, and so we've cleared up. Multiple ways of using Adobe Camera Raw before you spend a lot of time, before you spend a lot of time doing other enhancements on the image, which is why in the beginning of this hour, I was insisting on you get the subject correct first, crop what you need, get all the basics of the image, then go into the subtleties of highlights, shadows, corrections, and things like that. All right? We'll do more the next time. We'll do, I think, again, a two-part, where we'll work on some images, you'll work on the images, and then we'll do some more things in Adobe Camera Raw. And it's a combination of the two that we'll get more and more sophisticated with the things we can do with Adobe Camera Raw and making the adjustments before we do some really final adjustments. Well, before we will go, let me open this one here. Sorry, I keep getting excited about doing them. Take this into Adobe Camera Raw. Before I would do anything to this image, I'll take it into Adobe Camera Raw. And you see the reds up in the sky. I'll go back to the basic tab. Back to the basic tab. And just probably could click auto. I'm sorry, that's not where it is. Yeah, auto did okay, nothing great. Come down to the basic tab area here. And my first change on this would be do the dehaze. I'm looking for that drama in the sky. And by moving the dehaze slider, that gives it to me. Then I will adjust the highlights to remove those red marks in the sky area. Those are the first few things I do. Now, the difference between vibrance and saturation. Vibrance will increase the saturation of low saturated portions of the image. Saturation increases the saturation of all the colors in the image. So I usually don't do that, but I will come down and do a little bit of just vibrance and see what it's done to the church that's sitting here. I still have some red up in here. So either this highlight slider or down in the curves, click on, I like doing it this way, and click on that area and bring the bright highlights down just a little bit, and that adjusted those nicely. Now go back into, look what we did. And I was in a component of Photoshop called Adobe Camera Raw, but I wasn't in Adobe Camera Raw. Now we would do a number of things on this image, which we'll do the next time, increasing maybe the width and getting dots out of the sky and things like that.
John, can you, oops. Oh, I am on. Okay, John, can you give the definition or difference between the vibrance and saturation again, please?
Yes.
I wasn't writing fast enough.
Yes. I'm sorry. Vibrance increases low vibrant colors only. So if there are colors in the image that aren't very saturated, it will saturate only those and not the brighter, more saturated colors. Saturation increases the intensity of all the colors across the image.
Okay. Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Go have a good time. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for your time, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank
Very much,
you.
John.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.